Welcome you to tonight's webinar, Kids Stress Levels and Technology Use. We are so glad to have you here with us this evening. My name is Heather Parker, Senior Manager of Health and Safety at National PTA. During this presentation, we will be hearing from Dr. Mary Alvord about the findings from the American Psychological Association's 2016 Stress in America survey, specifically how the stress constant technology use puts on today's kids. So before we dive right into the agenda, the functionality of GoToWebinar is that you can enter questions in the question box noted here on your panel. We will be holding question and answers until the end of the session. I'd like you to please note that the webinar is for informational and educational purposes. Dr. Alvord will answer general questions and provide information on resources, but she is not able to respond to specific questions or comments about personal situations, diagnosis, or treatment, or provide any clinical opinions. So now I would like to introduce National PTA President Laura Bay, who is going to welcome our attendees. Laura?
Welcome, everyone. It is absolutely great to be with all of you tonight for this very timely and important topic. As the nation's largest volunteer child advocacy association with nearly 4 million members who are parents, students, and educators, National PTA is committed to the health and safety of all youth from early childhood through adulthood. That is why we are so excited to provide you with this opportunity to learn more from the experts on this topic and engage in a dialogue to find out how you can support your child. Before we begin, I would like to thank our partners at the American Psychological Association for their support and expert guidance on this issue. I also want to thank each and every one of you, concerned parents, educators, and professionals who work on a daily basis with all our youth. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this important conversation about the health impact of stress on teens and what families can do to help manage this issue.
Great, thank you, Laura, so much for that warm introduction. I now want to introduce Dr. Mary Alvord. She is a psychologist and director of the Alvord, Baker & Associates, LLC, a group practice in Maryland. She has more than 35 years of clinical experience with children and adolescents. Involved with her children's PTA throughout their school years, she also served as co-PTA president and elected to the Leadership Council at the high school level. She is past president of an APA division and made internet safety, and media literacy one of her presidential initiatives. She is co-author of Resilience Builder Program for Children and Adolescents, a CD on relaxation children and teens, and one for adults. Her forthcoming book is Conquer Negative Thinking for Teens. Currently, Dr. Alvord serves as American Psychological Association's Public Education Coordinator for the Maryland Psychological Association. She is adjunct associate professor in psychiatry and behavioral health at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. Dr. Alvord, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you now.
Thank you. Okay, I will just switch slides here. So I think you can all, Heather, can you see that clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. So I'll just begin. Thanks so much for the introductions and for the opportunity to talk about this topic. It is dear to my heart because, you know, we see so many kids and teens really stressed out, and now technology is part of everyday life, and it's constantly changing and constantly evolving. So let's just talk about stress for a minute. And, you know, we define that really as feeling like you can't control your environment. You don't have a lot of choices. You can't make changes. And you feel somewhat helpless and sometimes even like a victim. But there's also positive aspects of stress. A little bit of stress can really help us all, teens and children, motivated to get tasks done. If we didn't have any, a little bit, we'd probably say, we don't have to study, we don't have to get the work project in. The key is, how do you balance that so that you don't have, and you're not reacting to the stress in your life. And I tell kids, for example, you can't control whether your parents are going to change jobs and move to a different town or city or even state. But you can control coming up with a plan of trying to visit the new school, the new neighborhood, meet people. And so we can do a lot of things to alleviate our stress. And that's why we want to really see what are the signs of stress, and always, and I'm going to repeat this throughout, how critical it is to talk to your children. And I know teens aren't always easy to talk to because peers become so critically important in their life and they put a lot of their energies into it, but we have a little tricks to talking with them. So some of the warning signs, and I want to start with this because, kids, for the most part, do well. One of my areas of interest is resilience, and we find even given traumas and challenges, for the most part, everyone does fairly well. But for kids, and especially with this world of technology, we look for what are the warning signs. What do we need to be aware of as parents, as teachers, as administrators? And a big thing that as a psychologist we look for is, are there negative changes in behavior? Do they suddenly change their routines? Are they withdrawing from not only activities but also from their social network? Are their grades dropping? What are the changes that are coming into their life? And so that we can be attuned that perhaps it's not anything significant, but we need to probe a little bit deeper. And stress, we know, also manifests physically. The mind and the body are very much connected. So we know that when we feel stressed, our muscles tense up, we may get stomach aches. Teens report a lot of, arm tensing and headaches. As adults, we tend to manifest a lot of our stress in our necks and our shoulder areas, but for everybody it's a little bit different. But it does, there's a direct relationship with this. And then the third big category is, are there different interactions when they're at home versus with friends versus really at school? So communication is critical along all lines. And a trick that I found was making sure that I had a strong support network with other parents, my children's ages, so that I could also get feedback if they were aware, because kids will talk to their parents sometimes not about themselves, but about, my friend so-and-so is happening. And if you have that network, you can really get information that way if it's not coming directly from your child. And then kids, particularly, and even teens, they're not going to use the word stress necessarily, but what we find is an increased irritability, and so they may talk more about being angry or resentful, or it's not fair, or this is too much for me. And we also look at, are they talking negatively about themselves? And, we talk about sort of self-esteem in that. What if they don't do well on something? Are they saying, I'm stupid? Or are they saying, well, that was hard, but next time I can study more, or I can ask for help? So listen to the content of how they express that. And seeking support, we know we're not alone. We really want to give the message to our kids that they are not alone. Not only do they have parents, but maybe they have an extended family situation, perhaps, and hopefully they have a counselor at school or someone at school they can talk to, or then seek outside help. But we're not alone, and we don't want anyone to start feeling isolated. So the APA has been doing a Stress in America report over the last, I guess, 10 years almost, and in 2016 really looked at the connection between technology and stress. And as you see, 18% of Americans really identify this as a high source of stress. And I think with teens, it's also depending on like what's the current fad, and I'll talk about that a little bit. You know, Americans are really tied to their technology. In fact, if we don't have our phone, I hear lots of adults and kids even say, oh my gosh, you know, I don't have my phone with me. I feel so anxious about that. The millennials report the highest stress level and related to technology, and it may also have to do with their high usage, and they're using it very differently than I might, or you know, even some of the kids. So when we talk about stress level, really we have to look at developmental level and what have they grown up with, and you know, what are they using on a daily, or what are they exposed to. So parents worry about the technology, but I thought this graph was really interesting, and it coincides with what I find with my the kids that I work with in therapy. And for the most part, when I ask what do they use the social media for, you know, they tell me to be connected to friends. Now, one important thing is I always then follow up with, well, are these friends that you know from school, or are these people that you've met online? I think that's an important distinction, and I guess I'll use the terminology virtual friends as opposed to, and I don't say real friends because they get offended, just like, well, they are my real friends. But, you know, do they have actual contact with these people in the real world? They use it to feel more informed, stay connected with the families. I think that's good and bad. I think one expectation is that there's more of a connection. It's like, what if someone didn't call me back? Is like, uh-oh, something may have happened. Whereas when we didn't have so much technology, we were used to being more patient, and I think waiting and not having the expectations of instantaneous replies, which is a huge factor in what contributes to the stress level. And, you know, especially now with a lot of the Instagrams and the pictures and the Snapchats that a lot of the teens are using, and I'd say middle school to teens are using, not so much elementary, but that they want to show the best version of themselves. And of course, that then becomes a problem because they're showing the best version of themselves, their friends are showing the best version of themselves, and it's picturing as if everyone is just happy all the time, instead of like, or just so-so. And so we want to help them balance that. And, you know, we're talking about screens too. I would say that huge numbers of kids have their own tablets or access to tablets. Schools now have Chromebooks and others. So many teens and even kids starting in 5th grade have their own smartphones. And we haven't really focused on are some of the video games, which is another part that can be stressful, but I consider that part of the whole screen time that we talk about. So for the most part, I see technology for the good, and I think that's what we want to focus on. You know, technology is technology. How we choose to use it, how we interact with it, how as parents or educators we engage students or our children with them, that can be a positive factor or a neutral factor or even a negative factor. So there was a research study that took teens specifically took a break from their social media. And what they found is, hey, they actually had more time to do some other things, and they were, you know, happy to have a break and actually maybe relieved that there wasn't this constant pressure to exchange information. But they were also anxious that they were missing out. So the positive is that you can have digital homework. In the area I live in, we can check in Edline, it's called here. So for homework, you can really see if a kid has ADHD or is not, or organizational skills. You can really keep tabs on what, and they can begin to be more responsible in terms of taking ownership of the homework, even if they didn't bring it in. What do they need to do? Lots of learning skills. Lots of the kids use YouTube for learning and for positive activities, as well as self-expression. I think I have found that a lot of them even make their own videos, and there's a creative aspect to this, as well as social support and having that connection with people so that they don't feel so isolated. And again, all of this taken as a balance. We need to make sure it's all balanced, and we need to make sure that it's a safe space for them to have with their friends. You know, years and years ago, parents would complain that kids were on the phones too much. Well, you know, that was like old-fashioned phones. Then, you know, we reached an era where they had, well, before the smartphone, you know, phones, the flip phones, and it was, oh, they want to be on those all the time. And then it was, well, no, that wasn't cool anymore. They're texting all the time. And now they're not even so much texting. They're using Instagram and Snapchat and other means to stay connected. So it is a positive and can be a positive way to engage and to stay current with what is going on. So for kids sometimes who might even be on the spectrum, or kids who just tend to be more shy, it's a way to connect with other people. And of course, the wonderful thing is our families are spread all over large geographic areas. This is a way we can connect to people that we care about and families, and actually see them, and, you know, have younger kids and older kids share with relatives or whomever, you know, activities or things that they built or projects they're working on. And the last big category is it encourages resilience. You know, we often focus, I think, too much on sort of the, you know, it's not safe, it's too much, you know, it's addictive. But it's giving kids opportunities to learn and to navigate situations as well. Because if we protected them from everything, they wouldn't really know how to navigate. I give an illustration. I grew up in New York City and, you know, rode subways, and so I learned to scan who was around me. But if I had not, I had that opportunity, I think I wouldn't also feel comfortable in a large city or just being sensitive to what was going around me. It also helps in terms of teaching independence and having that, making hopefully good decisions. And media literacy is an area where parents really need to step in, and just as we help kids learn to read and discern what news is good and what we want them to watch, media literacy is really focused on digital. How do you navigate the digital world? How do you navigate even with video systems and video games? So many kids now are also playing you know, on servers, and so they're playing with other people. And media literacy is how do you tell sort of what is safe and what is good versus people you don't know, and giving them those boundaries. And again, I'll say that it really depends on the age. You know, with the younger kids, the parameters and the boundaries and the opportunities are going to be smaller. As they get older, we don't have as much control, but if we teach them the skills early, then that helps them as we grow. Some of the negative we've heard a lot about, of course, the cyberbullying, which is incredibly distressing because now not only do you, if you're in person, have a bully or maybe a few kids gang up on a kid, but when you're talking cyberbullying, they can broadcast it, so it can reach, with one click, many, many kids. Sometimes kids make poor decisions in terms of what they post, and then somebody else finds it and reposts it, and so someone who was posting to one friend suddenly becomes a target. There's also privacy concerns, and I think we need to really help them understand that what is on the internet sort of stays there forever. It doesn't really go away. We see things that are now shared that somebody said years ago, and it's brought up. But I think that what I see, especially with kids and teens, is they feel like, okay, they're doing it, and Snapchat says it's gone in 24 hours, but the question is, it's living somewhere, it's archived somewhere, and so we need to be thoughtful, which leads me to the next one, a term called sharenting. And sharenting is, we see lots of parents writing blogs and posting about their children, and I think we're the role model, so we need to be aware too. If we share this about our child, are we posting too much information in terms of a later identity theft or putting our children at risk? Is this something that they would feel bad about seeing, 20 years later? And so when we share as parents, especially online, I think we need to be mindful of what we're doing. And then some of the negative I see as particularly kids who then just hole up in their rooms, or they're playing video games for hours on end and not having the social interaction or the balance of life activities in terms of play and going outdoors and having school activities that they're involved with, or family time, and really even the eating and the sleeping can get, all of that needs to be balanced. And the safety issue is, are they really interacting with those who are not? I think that's one of our greatest fears that I hear parents talking about is, well, they're interacting with somebody virtually. Is it a real person? If somebody is saying they're another 14-year-old girl, are they really? And we'll talk about some tips for parents, because I think it's important not to hover and not to be a helicopter parent, but to monitor with reasonableness, and so that we are aware without being intrusive. But that also gets into the media literacy. And we don't want to overemphasize all the dangers, because I think there is so much more for good outcomes for technology if it's used well. It's a tool, just like any other tool, and how we use it can be, the positive or the negative. And I think I already said this, but, so many comments and pictures will be forever on cyberspace. The other thing we saw, we get instant news. Unfortunately, with this whole concert in Manchester, I think everybody gets notified, whether you're on Twitter or Facebook, or just get news alerts. And sometimes these constant images, or then the negative headlines without reading further, can create a great amount of stress, both for parents as well as for their children. And we know as parents, we are role models, but our kids also look to us to see how are we reacting to things. I think it was in one of the earlier, the 2009 or 2010 Stress in America survey, we found that parents underestimated how much their own stress impacted their children. So I think it's a factor that we need to take in account, because we are constantly being flooded with images and news and things that we often feel like we can control. And so we want to mitigate some of that. So the big thing is, what can we do as, you know, as parents to help? I think also some people on this may be teachers or administrators. The key, I think, is, and it's not here as the first, but the key is talk to your kids and keep talking to your kids. Listen carefully to what they're saying. One trick I found was when my kids, before they started driving, was they were a captive audience in the car, and I could control whether they were on media or if it was just time to talk. And if we had other kids in the car, is really listening, what are they talking about? And then engaging in a conversation with them as well, sort of free of any media, or at least part of the time. But talking to kids, and I would say instead of talk with kids about how they're being treated online. You know, first, the big question is, what are they doing online? Are they doing, are they texting? Are they doing apps of various kinds? Are they doing video games? And how are they using it? You know, well, tell me, explain, what are you doing, so that we take part in it, just as we take part when we're playing board games and help our kids learn the skills of taking turns and being good losers. You know, it's important to engage in and learn some of the games that they play. So instead of just monitoring it, get on there with them, ask them to show you what they're doing, with whom are they doing it. And then, of course, the question is, you know, how often are they doing it? And we'll get to that. But it's critical to be engaged, because we really want to always have an open communication line. And as I said, teenagers sometimes don't want to talk to their parents, but they're always interested in, you know, sharing what they're doing, or, you know, you're saying, hey, I discovered Snapchat, but I don't really know how it works. How does it work? And hey, I heard about snap streaks. And I heard snap streaks are things that, you know, you have to kind of respond in the day, and there's a hourglass, and like, do you do that? And how does it make you feel? I mean, I would think if I were you, it would put a lot of pressure on me to have to respond really quickly. And so it's, again, it's the open-ended conversations of, you know, what websites do they visit? And there are many tools for parents to block websites, and so I'm not an expert on that, but, you know, you can find many different tools to use. And then limiting screen time, but I don't think it's just a matter of time. It's well, what is it, a school day or non-school day? What is the context and what is the purpose? I think that is really the key, is not just how many minutes they can be on it, but what are they on, for what purpose, and then it's a decision of values for each family to make. There are the American Association of Pediatric, American Academy of Pediatrics has a site where you can, you know, put in your child's age and then really talk about how you're going to use technology. I even see 3-year-olds with iPads, and while that can be a positive if they're learning something, it can also be used, you know, and who knows what they might get into and not know, or expose, or just too much time on it. So I think the screen time, again, isn't just time factors, but it's how is it used. And then establishing a family safety contract, and a wonderful resource is the is FOSSI. It's the Family Online Safety Institute. They have a blog that is written for a good digital parent. I would really highly recommend it. They have a yearly conference and where they really address, you know, the pros and the cons, which is constantly changing. I constantly hear about new apps or new sites that kids are getting on. So, and then, you know, where are the electronic devices at home? And consider having some free, family-free time. Meals are always a great time, even if you don't have meals together all the time. You know, how can you limit it? How can you be respectful to each other so that you truly are listening and engaging in conversations? But, you know, designate, and I think you can have a family meeting for, you know, elementary school and up to really talk about how are the devices going to be used, when will they be used, and when are they just left. What I'll say is we know that sleep is so critical, and if kids have technology in their room, especially in teens, they sort of get sucked into doing it, and the lighting, but just the stimulation really takes away from adequate sleep. And, you know, you can discuss as a role model problem solving. You know, what have you faced online? What challenges do you face? What are these apps about? How do you, how you limit your technology? And really explore that and share that with them so that, no, it's not just they are doing it and you're imposing these rules, but that it's you too. And technology is a means. What are we using it for? How can we develop good habits with this? Because technology is just more and more in our lives. And, you know, we run programs and we have training in person, but now we have, like this, more webinars. So we're losing some of that in-person contact. How do we make up for it? Because we know as humans we're social creatures, and we also want our kids and our teens to have good social skills, and with resilience we know peer relationships and connections are critical to helping them face challenges. So I think now is the time that we can open up for questions.
Great, Dr. Alvord. Thank you so much for that presentation. And as a reminder, people can type in their questions in the comment box on your dashboard. As a reminder, this question and answer segment is for informational and educational purposes. So Dr. Alvord is not able to respond to specific questions or comments about personal situations, diagnosis, or treatment, or provide any clinical opinions. And Laura, I have muted your line as well, so people are welcome to submit questions into Dr. Alvord or to President Laura Bay. We'll give people a minute to type in their questions.
And, you know, I'll also point out that the American Academy has some time recommendations, and they have changed. In October, they changed it. It used to be sort of set guidelines for hours, and now they've tweaked it for more developmental levels. And they really talk about, you know, families making some decisions. But again, a lot of the experts, you know, want to make sure it's not just time, but that it's context and content and the kind of programming that they use.
Terrific. So do you have recommendations on resources we can use to set up age-appropriate filters on internet search engines and specific sites?
You know, I don't really know. An IT person could probably answer those questions, but I do know that there are increasing abilities to filter and on the back end. So with your router, and sometimes it's even just pulling out your router at night so it's not used. So I don't know, but a Family Online Safety Institute might be a good resource to find some of that out, and some IT people.
Great. What are your feelings on TVs and computers in bedrooms?
Personally, I feel like the bedroom should be a place to sleep, and we know from our research on sleep disorders that what we call sleep hygiene is really important, and so we need a sanctuary, I think, a place that is free of screens. I think it's too tempting to then use a screen if they're in our bedroom. And the other thing is, I think it's nice for a TV to be in more family space so that it can be watched together, so that you can watch. As they're teens, they do want to watch things more in privacy. But again, I think screens, my own personal, and people would vary, and I think it's a value that parents need to decide on. But I think there's many advantages to not having screens in the bedroom or the place where you sleep, because many families, kids share space. Siblings may share space, and so we need to be aware of that.
Great. What are some types or ways to help teens deal with stress or relax? My teen gets so stressed from homework and just melts down. So it's just overall stress the question is about.
Right. Well, I think that the key is how they're thinking about stress. What we know is that your thought may be, I can't do this, it's too much for me, there's too much work, how am I going to do it? I don't have enough time. And so getting to what they're thinking about it can help us lead to, well, what can we do about it? Because if it's, I don't have enough time to do this, the work is too hard, I didn't understand it, we can come up with plans. So often anxiety is feeling out of control. We don't know what to do. As soon as we come up with a plan, that helps alleviate not all, but much of the anxiety. It's like, well, you can call a friend for help, or if you missed out on some information, maybe a parent can help or a sibling can help. And for general stress, it's usually not just one thing. It's a lot of things that are contributing to that. Teaching them relaxation techniques. I think breathing is so critical in terms of teaching them to have deep breaths, really diaphragmatic breathing. And I often do it the easy way is I just say breathe out. So instead of breathing in, I'll say blow it out as if you're blowing a balloon or you're blowing bubbles. And if you try it yourself, when you blow out, you automatically take a very deep breath in. And if we can pace our bodies, it helps us pace our minds as well, because we need to get the bodies, kind of a calmer so that we can think with more clarity. There's a lot of mindfulness exercises in terms of being in the moment. We often are stressed when we're worried about what's going to happen. Well, what if this happens? And what if I can't get my work in? And what if my friends are going to? And so we counter that what if thinking with, well, how likely is that to happen? What are other possibilities that might happen? And what can you do with it? And can you handle it? So I think we combat anxiety both from a physiological level and teaching relaxation techniques, and much is helping them challenge a lot of their thinking process about it, because it's not just the event, it's not just homework, it's how you view the homework, for example.
Great. And I think this is building off of that question. Any resources or curriculum that you know of to teach children to reduce stress or self-calming?
Well, I think there's quite a few books on the market and CDs on the market and some apps. What I like to look for evidence-based strategies, and cognitive behavior therapy is one of the kind of the gold standard for dealing with stress and anxiety in terms of treatment. So if you look at, can Google some cognitive behavior therapy and stress reduction techniques. There are many resources on that.
Terrific.
So Heather, this is Laura.
Hi, Laura.
So Dr. Alvord, can you just share a little bit, because I know as a parent sometimes when we got into this homework thing and it was about stress, sometimes, and I'm going to be honest, admit it, my stress contributed to the stress of my son or daughter, and then they fed into my stress. Can you talk about maybe the need for the dynamic of the whole family or the caregiver to be part of that equation? Would you care to comment on that?
Well, it's a great question, and it affects us all. I think that, we love our children so much that we don't want them to be stressed, but then we get stressed. And like I said, one of the earlier stress surveys showed that parents often thought kids didn't hear or didn't see, and so they didn't realize how stressed they were. But when we're stressed and we're not taking care of that, we're more apt to jump the gun and reach conclusions that may not even be true. We raise our voice. We have facial expressions that are not exactly pleasant. We're less patient or less willing and able to problem solve. So I would say as parents, it really behooves us to have some strategies for ourselves, whether it be, I like visualization. For me, I can visualize, because I've practiced it for so long, a beach and just, the waves and the sounds and the birds in the air and the salty taste. And so there's many techniques that we can do for ourselves. And you're absolutely right. When we're stressed, that adds to our kids' stress. We know that from the research. And then when they're more stressed, we're more stressed, and we really need to look about breaking that cycle. So I think the first thing is to just be aware of that cycle. And sometimes, if you're working and you come home and everybody is like asking questions and I have to do this and I have to make dinner and et cetera, is maybe have a time that you say, I just need 10 minutes to chill. And then we will go on to the next phase. And also respect that sometimes kids need that chill time before they move on to the next activity or homework. So I hope that answers it, but it really is a cycle, and it's important to then be aware of what that cycle is and how can we break it. And sometimes you could break it with other family members helping out too. If we're really stressed about something particularly, getting a partner to help out, or maybe another family member, or even a neighbor.
Thank you. I think you really hit it. And I think sometimes we can be examples for our children in being able to even state, I'm really stressed about this right now, so I'm going to take a 10-minute chill. Would you, can we both take a 10-minute chill and then come back type thing? Does that make sense?
Yes, and find out from them, like, say, I take a 10-minute chill by doing X, Y, Z. What would help you to feel more chill or calmer or cool, so that we're not just assuming that what works for us is going to work for them either.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Are there any additional questions for Dr. Alvord? Give it about another minute. And if I may add, Dr. Alvord, with the contract, component, National PTA and LifeLock have developed a digital contract called the Smart Talk. It's available on nationalpta.org. You can also go to the smarttalk.org and download a contract if parents are interested in having that talk with their kids, setting up an agreement between how much screen time you'll have, what kind of sites you'll visit, being respectful, but it's having that conversation together. So I just wanted to build on your point that you said earlier. I believe it is on the FOSI website as well.
Right. And I'll just piggyback on that. It's important for us to be interactive because so often kids are like, my parents tell me this and my parents tell me that, but they don't listen to me, they don't hear me, and they're on the phone a lot. So I get that also, that kids are saying their parents are not available to them because they're talking on the phone. So I think just as we have maybe some areas in our houses that are zone, free of some screens or phones, we also just need to be cognizant of what we do. And look at these resources. I think there are more and more resources. I know the American Psychological Association, came out with also a tip sheet on guidelines. But it's an evolving situation. As I said, it's important to always find out what are your kids doing, and the simplest is asking them to show you what it is. Well, what sites were you on? And how do you use it? And what do your friends do? Sometimes they won't answer if you say, well, what are you doing? And say, oh, what are your friends doing? What's of interest to them? And often I find they get really excited to show you, they may not want to show you the pictures that they have sent out, but they'll show you their friends' pictures. But it is changing. It's hard for me to keep up with all of the apps. And then, of course, we saw like Pokemon Go, which was exciting because it actually got families engaged together and, exercise and walking and moving around. So let's say there's so much potential for technology for the good, but we have to balance that with digital and media literacy. And I can't say that enough. I was quite distressed with this Manchester tragedy with the concert with these young people, that there was some fake news on Twitter, saying, oh, my child is lost and I can't find them. And they determined that was fake. And, just letting kids and teens know that that happens and that we just need to be aware.
Great. And then how do you know when you are overly pushing your child for excellence? This person is specifically focusing on the high school age, but that's a great question for all kids.
So I think what we, as parents, we want to strive for excellence, but we have to be careful we're not striving for perfection. And that's how I distinguish it, because often we're really striving for perfection, which is unrealistic because there is no perfect, and we're all going to make errors, but you need to assess for excellence what is realistic for your child to perform. We want to teach them perseverance, and if you haven't read the book Mindset, really praising the effort, not necessarily the grade, but the effort and the concentration and attention that goes into the process of the work, because after all, that's what they need to learn. So we want to strive for kids being as best they can, but we need to find out from teachers, what might be realistic in terms of how much they do. And I think we need to make sure our kids have balanced lives. They need to be involved in physical activities. They need to be involved with friends. They need downtime. I get concerned sometimes with some of the school programs. AP courses used to be a thing of juniors and seniors, and now we're seeing freshmen take AP classes with just volumes of reading and not giving them the opportunity maybe to have after-school activities or just hang out or just free time to be creative. We know that free time often helps us become more creative. And so just keep that balance in mind, like the excellence versus perfectionism, making sure that we strive for the best, but not for sort of that extreme of perfectionism, and temper it all with the realism of how much can you do and how much can your child do.
Okay, great. Are there any additional questions for either Dr. Alvord or Laura Bay? Okay, we don't seem to have any additional questions coming in. Dr. Alvord, I didn't know if you had anything final to say, and if not, I can close out this evening's webinar.
Just one other thing that I thought of is with all the apps that especially the teens are downloading, while you don't want to be intrusive, you will get feedback too in terms of your internet usage, how much data is being used, and so that's another conversation to have in terms of their being respectful of limits in terms of data and understanding the implications of their activities, even if they're perfectly fine activities, but that, you know, it uses data and that costs the family money. So I think all of those, you know, so much of this again is open communication. It's just talk and keep the communications open so that they know that you may not agree with them, but you're willing to listen to them and problem solve together. It's really like collaboratively working with your child. And often they'll come up with setting limits that, you know, you may have thought of, but if you say it, they're going to be more oppositional about it. But if they come up with ideas, you can build on those ideas and say, that was a fantastic idea. And how about this as well? So it's negotiating.
Great.
There's no handbook on parenting, and there's certainly no complete on technology because it's just evolving so quickly.
Wonderful. And then Laura, do you have any final words, or should I go ahead and close out the webinar?
I think the only thing I would like to add is just for parents to be aware that while they have these conversations at home about expectations and use, they should also probably branch off a little about, do those expectations stay when they're out with other kids or out of other families, and then to make sure that you've had a good dialogue about, well, it might be allowed at one home, it's not at our home, so how would you handle it if you walked into a home where the technology rules were very, very different, especially around some of those apps where children might be more at risk. So I think that that's just something good for parents to also keep in mind, that it's just not what you have at home or what they might see at schools that might have filters, but also what they see out in the rest of the world.
Right. And if I could just add one more aspect to that, I think that's why it's so important as a parent to have a network of parents for yourself so that you can have those conversations about what their values are. That's why I felt so involved. I was involved with the PTA for many, many years, and met people who otherwise I wouldn't know, but classmates of my children. And then just being involved if there's a swim club or some kind of a recreational club, to expand the parent network so that you share information, and not just to get information about your own child, but have a sense about what rules and limits and that other parents have as well, that don't necessarily jive, and you can prepare for that.
Great words to end on. So Laura and Dr. Alvord, thank you so much for your time tonight, for your thoughts, for your expertise. I know this was valuable for our attendees. I did not mention in the beginning of the webinar, we are recording this, so I can make a copy available to everyone that participated tonight. I'll send it out tomorrow. We will also have it available on the National PTA YouTube channel. So this concludes our webinar. Thank you so much for participating and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Good night.
Thank you.